The concept of a niche is something that plagues those of us with multiple passions and interests almost like nothing else. Like, just pick one thing, one path, one aesthetic, and run with it. And so we do. We try to put ourselves into these boxes, these pre-made categories, and hope for the best. And a lot of the time, it ends in creative suffering, and sometimes suffering almost on a higher level. So that's what I want to talk about in this video. Why we fall victim to some of the problems associated with a niche and having a niche, but also how we can rethink our whole approach to it so that it works in a way that aligns with our multiple passions, our interests, and still allow us to move forward and impact those around us. For starters, I would like to say the concept of a niche is not inherently bad, right? And I actually want to draw on a definition or two definitions of niche just to pull out why this is important. Definition of niche: a comfortable or suitable position in life or employment. 2, a specialized segment of the market of a particular kind of product or service. Now, given these definitions, it makes sense why having a niche can be a very positive thing, right? There's a level of predictability. You can specialize in a particular thing or set of things to achieve an outcome and to become very skillful or very useful as it pertains to that outcome or skill. Like a doctor, for example. I'm not mad, for example, if my doctor has niched down in, being an orthodontist, and I'm mad because he doesn't also play the violin and he doesn't oil paint on the weekends. He might, but I'm not mad that he has niched down and specialized in this particular thing. The issue I have with the niche, or the way that we approach the niche, is when a single thing becomes our whole identity. For example, I am a doctor and that is my whole identity. And then you start to find it difficult to veer off into other paths or to incorporate other things into that part of your life and just your life in general. Or worse yet, you never form your own niche based on your unique set of characteristics and interests. So let's just dive a little bit deeper. Now, the first challenge we face is that a lot of us have not taken the time out to work out what we're actually interested in, what it is that makes us unique. And so we take what's offered to us. We take what's put on the table in the form of a niche, a path, an aesthetic. Now, this process often starts when we're a lot younger and, somebody tells us that, oh, you're good at this, maybe you should try this. And we kind of run with it. Like, you're good at biology, why not be a doctor? You're good at the sciences, pursue that route. And you're like, yeah, I guess I am good at that. And I guess this thing does come with some prestige, so I'll run with that. But because you haven't taken the moment or haven't been allowed the space to consider that, yes, I'm interested in this one thing, but I'm also potentially interested in actually more specifically how plants work and plant biology, and all microorganisms in this particular sense, or I'm actually interested in scientific communication. So how we can translate this information here, which can get quite complex and convoluted, and also then share that with a wider audience, maybe people of a younger age or people who aren't scientists but are interested in the natural world. But you can clearly see how if I haven't explored all of these ideas or haven't even given myself room to consider these other interests, how I can't form my own niche, my own set of skills or my own job, my own way that I will impact the world, because I've given all my attention to the one that's been prescribed to me, this particular niche. So now I'm a doctor when I really should have been the next David Attenborough. This is kind of a personal one. I really thought I was going to be like a David Attenborough type of person when I was younger. That might still happen. I'm not taking those cards off the table. But the key point here is that working out what your interests are and how they may align is a lot of work, right? It's a lot more work than just being told, oh, you're good at this, do this. Right? One of them requires introspection and working out ways that you can gather information on your interests, and the other is just hand it over. Okay, so then how do we solve for this particular problem, right? We don't want to just be handed a niche or a path for the rest of our lives. We want to form our own. So there's actually two quite simple exercises that I think you can do in order to draw this information and data out about your interests, your passions, your skills, and so forth, and how they may intersect. The first is from the book Ikigai, which I'm currently reading. Now, Ikigai translates into English from Japanese to roughly the reason to live, or your reason to live, which it sounds a bit intense, but in all fairness, this is an intense process. Like, we're trying to work out what drives us and where we want to go with our lives, or at least the path that we want to start on. It forces us to consider 4 things: what we love, what we're good at, what we can be paid for, and what the world needs. And effectively, you're drawing a Venn diagram to see where there's crossover, and ultimately your Ikigai is that thing in the middle. And that's what we're trying to get at. And it might not be one thing, there may be multiple things in this particular category. But the idea is that the more that we have connections between these things, potentially the more fruitful our niche or our endeavor or our path will look. And the closer we get to our core value, our core Ikigai. Now, the second exercise is something that I want to pull from a video that I did a while back, maybe a year or two ago. And this is where you use your watch history to work out what it is that you may be interested in. I think sitting in front of all of us is a pool of data on ourselves that we can use and leverage to work out what it really is that we want and what it really is that's fueling our interests. Now, this is because we're typically looking at things and watching things that we're interested in, right? Whether it be in the entertainment space, the education space. But what happens when you actually take an analytical view of your watch history is you start to find patterns. You start to find patterns across the board. And I went into depth how I noticed that a lot of the escapism videos that I was watching were actually to do with financial freedom, geographical freedom, creative freedom. I could pull out that even though living in a van was different to living in a cottage, which was different to flying first class around the world or whatever, they all had certain things that ran in common. And I could draw these out and get closer to my understanding of the life that I wanted to build. And therefore, what kind of activities or work or creative work would lead to that kind of life, right? Like would lead to me forming work around a niche that made sense for me and the life that I wanted to live. So I implore you to look into your watch history. Take a look back, especially over the last 6 months. What are you watching, right? Who are you watching? What do their lives look like? And don't just latch onto one person or one thing, because it's deeper than that. Look for patterns across the board. Now, the second challenge I think that we face when it comes to niching down or finding our own unique path in this world comes down to consumerism, and more specifically, this whole idea of a starter pack. And so what do I mean by this? Well, the last point that we spoke about requires introspection. It requires work and time with yourself. That's not always easy. Now, juxtapose this with the fact that I can give you a starter kit to match this aesthetic, this pre-built out niche, this pre-built out professional pathway. And that's going to look a lot more appealing in the short term than work out for yourself in terms of the knowledge that you need to acquire, the tools you need, maybe the furniture you need to go with this. That's a lot more work. And sometimes we end up falling into the niche then that looks most appealing or looks easiest in terms of getting started because it's just there. It's just there in front of us. The work has been done by someone else. And even though we know it's not quite us, even though we know it doesn't quite align with our interests and our passions, and actually there's a lot of things in this particular niche that I cannot connect with at all, forget it. I have Amazon links now. It doesn't matter. I can just go up, put things in my cart, and I'm set to go from tomorrow. And it seems like a trivial point, but I think this desire to have things just readily made and buyable, a Bible word, I'm not sure, but we can just consume them, boom, we've got them, will lead us down a path that isn't aligned for us, instead of just doing more work up front to live a better life in the long term. But before I stop there, I actually want to use an example from fashion to really highlight this. I was watching something and unfortunately I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were talking about how fashion, like true fashion and style, isn't something that you can just get in a starter pack. And I think this relates more to creativity in general, but also the way we live our life and build our niches. He said you can't just buy in a starter pack and just get the tick box exercise because Boohoo or whatever said this is what the starter pack for the clean girl aesthetic, or I don't know what the aesthetics are called these days. True style or true fashion has to be lived. Fashion is worn. It exists in a world where you are going about your day-to-day business and you're thinking about functionality, right? You're thinking about your weather, but you're also thinking about your interactions with the people around you. Fashion is lived. And I think this idea or this analogy, I like it. The idea that in order to really find out what it is that your niche is or what it is that you want to do in life, and it's evolving, right? It's not just a set in stone and never changes, but it requires some living. It requires some putting yourself out there and trying things, and tapping into different facets of yourself. It must be lived. It cannot just be bought in terms of a starter kit or a Pinterest board. I love Pinterest. The next problem that a lot of us face is we know what we want to do. We know what our niche and our path looks like, but we're scared. More specifically, we don't have the courage to be disliked. Now, this is a book that I read I think about 6 weeks ago that I finished this book, perhaps slightly longer. But the book is called The Courage to be Disliked. And it kind of leans on the fact that a lot of us are doing things to please others. Sometimes without even knowing. You might not even describe yourself as a people pleaser, but the life that you're living is in line with what people expect of you. The niche that you've gone down, the work that you do, is in line with what your parents think you should do. Your grandparents, your teachers, that person that you worked with once before, your mentor, you're using these kind of markers to indicate where you should go in life, what your niche should be, what your path should be. A lot of us have to get over this fear of being disliked, because at the end of the day, I promise you, even if you do nothing, people will dislike you. I come on this internet and there are people who do not like me. That is just a fact of the world. Is it going to stop me? Has it stopped me formulating my ideas and coming up and showing and sharing what is interesting to me and what I want to move forward in life and how I want to impact people? No. Granted, to be honest, I have kind of an elite community and most of the people are great, so. But anyway, it's still a reality. Some people vocalize their dislike for you, others don't. The reality is there's always someone there in the background. So it's up to you now to decide, given that there's always going to be somebody who dislikes you, are you going to do it anyway? And like get on with your life, build out the niche and the path that you want? Or are you just going to fold, do nothing, or not do what you actually want to do? And they still probably don't like you. And on the topic of people that are closer to you, this is where it's harder, but the same premise remains. Are you going to live your life for them, or are you going to live your life for you? And hope that you can impact people, including them around you, when you go down that path. And so the solution, if you like, or my proposed method for this is really just do it anyway. Like at some point you have to decide what is more important to you. Usually this happens when the pain of not doing it is greater than anything else, right? Like say you want to make videos and you're just scared of being disliked and you're scared of this and that. At some point, and it happened with me, the pain of not making content, not doing something that I knew I would likely love and I had been watching others, it got so big that I said, whatever, we're doing this. There's a tipping point usually. And I think the more that you think about what this means to you, what it means to craft your own niche, craft your own space in this world, the more you think about what you're losing when you don't, the easier it is to just do it anyway, risk being disliked. The next challenge is to do with unfair advantages. Now this idea and this topic of unfair advantages is something that I really like, and I keep bringing it up in so many things because I think there are so many applications for the unfair advantage. But because you are not leaning into your unfair advantages, you have failed to see how you are unique and special and can form a niche with value that is inherent by just existing. Like you in your current form, with your experiences, with your characteristics, with your skills. That is so powerful. I want to give you an example, but when I started YouTube, I looked around at the other women in the personal development space. And naturally I thought, okay, so to be successful, I need to be more like them. And it wasn't until I got to the point where I was like, I don't actually resonate with a lot of this stuff. Sometimes it was the topics, like, for example, I couldn't really sit and talk for 30 minutes about manifestation. And that's not to say that I don't think there are value in some of these things that I'm going to talk about, but that just wasn't my bag, right? Or their editing styles weren't quite how I would have edited the video, or the way that they approached the actual structure of the video. I come from an engineering background. Perhaps being in this space of women and personal development, that is an unfair advantage to me, because I don't see that many of us. So that means that the way that I think about things is a very process-driven approach to life, right? Logic, structure, dependencies, things like that. Things that come with my engineering background, I can bring into this space, and I have done so. And it's funny because the more that I leaned into those things, I found people that enjoyed this type of video, this type of structure, this type of way of thinking about things. So when you're thinking about crafting your own niche or what it is that you want to do, list out your characteristics, your skills and experiences. And I mean all of them, as many as you can think. Working class background. I'm a woman. I am, from a Caribbean and also African descent, but I was also, born in London. I have worked as an engineer. I've worked as a receptionist. I've worked as an English teacher in Japan. All of these things. I have tried oil painting and I am pursuing that, but I also have done lifting. Just list all of these things out. I'm a sibling. Anything that you can think of, and you'll be surprised that each one of these things can be seen as an advantage or a disadvantage, and it depends on how you frame them. You could argue that, being working class is a disadvantage, and in many cases it is, but in some cases it's an advantage. If it's changed the way that I see the world, the way that I see money, the way that I see opportunities in certain ways, and I can bring that, say, to my content, my niche, or whatever it is, to drive people forward, to make connections for impact, that's now an advantage that I have over maybe a trust fund baby. So list it all out, paper, whether it's on the digital format, doesn't really matter. And you'll be surprised as you can see how this wealth of experiences and just innate things, some things you were just born with and luck, they actually impact your ability to form your own really special, impactful niche. And the final challenge we come across when it comes to the niche is that we may seek out a niche because we crave community and we crave acceptance, a very, very normal human thing and human desire. The issue though is if we try to force ourselves into a niche just for that component, right? And so we find ourselves again moving through life and moving through our niche, if you like, with this in the back of our mind that yes, I'm happy that I have this, I'm happy that I have people to speak to on this topic, but something is missing. Something is missing. And I don't really want to spend too much time on this particular topic because whilst I think community is very, very important, I think the solution is very, very simple. If you have multiple passions and interests, you can belong to multiple communities. This is option one. So perhaps you like oil painting, fitness, content creation, whatever. Why can't you be a part of all of those? Why can't you join a group for each of those, attend events for each of those, and dip into those facets of yourself and form out your own kind of almost schedule, if you like, or points of connection? The alternative is build your own community, which is exactly what I'm doing. I felt like there was not a community for women who, had multiple passions and interests and were interested in taking almost the chaos of those multiple passions and interests, creating structure around them, articulating those ideas, creating an audience in a group, and potentially even monetizing it. I don't really feel like I could feel that or sense that around, so I'm building my own. So, if you can't find it, build it. There are so many tools on the internet now that there's really no excuse. There's really no excuse, because if you're watching this, you have access to the internet and some sort of device. And most things don't even require a laptop anymore. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about. This idea of the niche, and it's not inherently bad, but how our approach to the niche and how we decide on a niche and invest in it can be the challenge. That can be the problem, but there are solutions to these things. There are ways that we can think about niching down, think about providing value, think about specializing that don't mean that we have to throw everything that we love out the window for a predetermined, out-of-the-box solution. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are interested in joining the community, then check the description below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.